all the information that you're going to find in this episode. I've got the references below, and the whole essay is on my members areas at my website, where you can find down in the link below, but I'll talk about that later on. So without further ado, let's talk about spine flexion. There's a lot of controversy around spine flexion, and with any movement of the spine, it will change how the spine is loaded. So spine flexion is one of them. So bending the spine forward will change how the spine and the tissues of the spine is loaded. But what I should say at this point is spine flexion on its own doesn't really present a high risk. So if it's sat on a chair and you're sort of slouching, or you're in the car and you're slouching, that inherently isn't a problem. There are other factors that need to be within just sitting or within bending that will cause it to become a problem. So there is nothing inherently wrong with sitting with a flex spine or bending with a flex, or lifting with a flex spine. What changes is when it becomes loaded, and when there is high repetition of flexion. So if we start now making this sitting for prolonged periods of time, again, this can start changing the dynamics of the tissue within the spine, which can create the instability. So what we have to focus on is not necessarily the spine flexion, but the spine flexion that's in combination with high repetition, or high load and high repetition. Now, with that said, when pain is present, then this sort of changes the rules of the game. So there are different rules. It's not just one blanket set of rules. You should never flex your spine. That's not a rule. That's just what people have taken out of context. What I'm trying to explain here is the rules of the game and the context in which certain rules apply, if that makes sense. So when pain is present, it's more important to remove, or certainly minimize, spine flexion. So if spine flexion is a trigger for your back pain, then it's going to be useful to remove that. And to explain why that is sort of beyond the scope of this episode. But again, there is a mini course or a micro course in the members area where you can learn more about that. So when pain is present, specifically from spine flexion, then it's going to be useful to minimize it. So you might want to reduce the posture that you're in, or reduce the flexion that you're in while you're sitting, or you may want to modify movement, or whatever it is. Now, other studies have also found that the load, it's known as chronic low back load, so that load has been a significant risk factor. And what they were able to do in that study is they were able to quantify the amount and the load. Now, this isn't a hard and fast rule, but what it does do is it does highlight that as the weight and the repetition goes up, load increases, this causes tissue changes, and then this can lead to low back injury. So what they were able to find in workers, so this isn't in athletes, this is in workers, that 15 lifts over a working day at over 25 kilos increased risk of low back pain. So 15 lifts a day at over 25 kilos. Now, how long it took for the back to injure, that again is slightly beyond the scope of this episode, and also it was beyond the scope of the study as well. But what they were able to do is they were able to identify changes which showed the increase in risk. What they also did is they looked at moderate lifting well. So a moderate lifting task that loads the low back to 200 Newton meters. So this was 50 times during a working week, would increase risk of low back pain. Now again, this isn't to prove that you should only lift 49 times in a working week. It's there to highlight that there are limits to how much a low back can take, and those limits are determined by the person's condition, the person's injury history as well. So someone who has a healthy back, that back will last longer than someone who has had a history of back pain. But what they are doing is they are using different weights, different loads, different frequencies to be able to try and determine, to try and find, okay, well, let's try and find some general rules that we can follow. And again, the general principle that comes out of this is that it's not spine flexion that is inherently the problem. It's also the load being lifted and the frequency at which those loads are being lifted. But again, the individual has to be taken into consideration with all of this. So, as I mentioned, spine flexion is okay to do if it's in isolation, if it's not done a lot of the time, and if there's not a lot of heavy loading that's come with it. Now let's move on to rotation, or at least add rotation into the mix. Are you tired of guessing what actually is working for your body? Well, it's time to train smarter and not necessarily harder by joining the Fundamentals of Health and Fitness by me, Chris, from Christopher Hole Training, which is your all-in-one guide to building strength, overcoming lower back pain, building core strength and stability, improving posture, and much, much more. Every month you'll get a Simple Science newsletter which will give you insights to all of those topics. We've got mini courses on low back pain, posture, rehabilitation, building strength, step-by-step exercise workshops to help you move safely and perform exercises correctly and more confidently, and follow along core and posture workouts that you can do anytime, anywhere, because they're equipment free and short. So get involved, join the members area, click the link below, and I'll see you on the other side.